Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to the Stewards Room, where we'll be taking a look at racing incidents submitted by you guys and trying to make a determination on who, if anyone, was at fault. There's a link in the description to submit your own clips, and feel free to check out the playlist link for more of these videos, specifically the first, which acts as a scene setter. Also, keep an eye out for cards popping up on screen at the start of each segment, where you can vote on who you thought was at fault for each incident. So straight into it with the Austrian Grand Prix from this year, with Verstappen and Leclerc going for the overtake to lead the race. And obviously you can vote on the poll in the top right hand corner of the screen. Should Verstappen have got a penalty for this, or was it right that he didn't get a penalty? So I'm going to give some interesting thoughts, and maybe possibly not the thoughts that people are thinking that I would give, but also use it to kind of talk a little bit about what's wrong with the whole rule process. So before we get into the actual discussion, I'm going to have a look at the rules of racing that we always look at, and specifically talking about this part of the rules when it comes to the exit of a corner. As it says, we've gone over this in previous episodes, the guiding principle is that the driver on the outside of the corner should be at least level, that's front axle in line with front axle, with the driver on the inside to have a claim to the racing line on corner exit. So as you can see here from this first image, if the driver is level at this point, then the driver on the inside should be giving space on the exit of the corner. If the driver is behind at any point, if the driver on the outside is behind even slightly, then the driver on the inside is free to continue his racing line and run to the outside of the track. Now, to me, with that in mind, this seems like an absolute clear-cut stonewall penalty. And I'm not saying this because I don't think Max Verstappen deserved to win the race. I'm just saying that, I'm going to talk about this later on, the stewards have kind of backed themselves into a corner with this one. But as you can see there, they are level, that they are absolutely front axle in line with front axle. That's exactly what the rules have just said that we've read. And that means that Leclerc on the outside is deserving of some space on the outside of the track. He doesn't get that. Contact occurs and he's forced off the track by Verstappen. But something else to keep in mind is that the racing document that we look at is kind of based on the modern consensus and what based on the decisions that have been made in the past. But if you actually look at the specific rules from the Formula One, sporting regulations, this is the only thing that's mentioned. Obviously, there's quite a few rules that are around what you can and can't do on a straight, which we've, like I said, been over in previous episodes. But this is all that's mentioned in the entire sporting regulations for Formula One. Manoeuvres liable to hinder other drivers, such as deliberate crowding of a car beyond the edge of the track or any other abnormal change of direction, are not permitted. That's all it says. So there's so much room for interpretation with that. But the key point is deliberate crowding of a car beyond the edge of the track. That is something that you're not allowed to do. So was this deliberate crowding of another car off the edge of the track? Now I'm going to show you here that, in my opinion, it absolutely was. And this is more of a penalty than what we've seen in the previous two races from Daniel Ricciardo and Sebastian Vettel, who both got penalties for forcing another driver off the track. Well, if those two get penalties, I don't see how you can't give a penalty for this. Now, just to put it out there, in my opinion, I don't think any of them should have got penalties. I don't think Vettel should have got a penalty. I don't think Ricciardo should have got a penalty for the first instance. And I don't think this was really deserving of a penalty either. But if you're going to give a penalty for one, you have to give a penalty for all of them. So, as you can see, we've got Verstappen coming up there. He goes, late into the corner. He's not actually even gonna actually hit the apex, so he's going deep into the corner, but he's far enough alongside going up the inside to be getting away with being able to do that. That's fine. So he turns into the corner. This is all fine. Leclerc does take avoiding action on the first part of it, which is fine, but again, at this point they're still level, as you can see right there. They're totally level, front axle to front axle. And then what you're gonna see is Verstappen opens up the steering on his steering wheel. He's obviously at full lock at this point, but it doesn't stay like that. So keep an eye on the steering wheel, opens it up there, and then immediately afterwards, contact. So the contact only happens when Verstappen starts to open up his steering and basically drive Leclerc off the track. And it's contact, that it was, if you're going to talk about deliberate crowding of another car off the track, opening up the steering like that, he didn't have to. He could have kept it on full lock, but he decided to open up the steering. And isn't it amazing that as soon as the steering is opened, the contact occurs? So, you can argue about whether the rules are right or not, but this is forcing another car off the track. And by all modern consensus, Leclerc had done enough and he was alongside enough on the outside to be deserving of some space. Now, if you take a look at the previous lap, this is the first attempt, and Verstappen tries to do basically the same thing, but he actually does a better job on this first lap. So he gets up the inside more, and he's ahead at this point, and he's well ahead. And at this point, if he decided to completely run Leclerc out of room and just take his normal racing line towards the outside of the track, there could have been absolutely no complaints because Leclerc is clearly behind at that point. But he doesn't do that on this previous lap, and it allows Leclerc to keep on the outside and then beats him to the next corner. So Verstappen knows that if he does that again, Leclerc's just going to try to stay on the outside and again keep him, beat him to the next corner with a higher straight line speed. So he purposefully, opens up his steering to force him off the track, and that is not allowed as the rules are set out. Vettel got a penalty in Canada for forcing another car off the track without any contact whatsoever. Ricciardo got a penalty in France for forcing another car off the track without any contact whatsoever. I don't understand how Verstappen doesn't get a penalty for forcing another car off the track with contact. It makes no sense. Now, like I said, in my personal opinion, none of them should have been penalised. I would say that they're all just kind of racing incidents. They're things that happen. But that's the problem with the stewarding in Formula 1 is that the first two incidents, Ricciardo and Vettel, were penalised, and this wasn't. And this is more clear of a penalty than the first two were. And I'm no major hater of Max Verstappen or defender of any other driver. I've defended Max Verstappen during this series previously. I'm just talking about how the rules are, and it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And there's just as we were saying in the last episode, that the stewards were finally starting to be a little bit more consistent with the rules as they're set out. This is going completely the opposite of that. So, I mean, that is the problem with the rules, and I think from this point on, I'm going to kind of, use that rules of racing document as a bit of a guide and use the rules that F1 set out as a bit of a guide, specifically when it comes to what you can and can't do on a straight, because that's more governed and that's reasonable. But I think when it comes to situations like this, I'm just going to start giving my own personal thoughts as if I was a steward, instead of following, to the letter what is set out in that rules of racing document that we continually use. I'm going to just give my thoughts. And, if it was me, I wouldn't be giving a penalty for this. I wouldn't be giving a penalty for Ricciardo. I wouldn't be giving a penalty for Vettel in the previous few episodes. And I think Formula 1 needs to start looking at the rules that they've set out, and better define what it is. So I'm going to put another poll before we move on to the next clip. It will pop up in the top right about now. Have you changed your mind? Should Verstappen still have gotten a penalty, still not have had a penalty for this? Or now that you've seen how the rules are laid out and what he actually did, should he have been given a penalty? Because as the rules are, for me, this is a clear penalty. He crowded another car off the track and the car was deserving of some space because he was absolutely level. Even if he'd been a little bit behind Leclerc, that would have been fine and he would have been allowed to be run out of room. But he was totally level. So for me, as the rules are set out now, this was a clear penalty. But I want to see if you guys have, changed your thoughts from earlier on. Maybe you've changed the opposite way and you thought it was a penalty and now you don't. But as the rules are set now, this was absolutely a penalty, especially if Vettel and Ricciardo got penalties for what they did in the previous two races. Like I said, the rules as they're set out and changing the rules to allow more open racing is a discussion for another time, and I personally think that that should be done, and I don't think there should have been penalties for either of these three. But to give penalties for 2 instances and not give it for this one, when arguably it was even worse with contact, it's a bit weird. So yeah, great drive by Verstappen though, fantastic. He deserved to win the race, but then again, Vettel deserved to win the race in Canada, and Ricciardo deserved to not lose his points finish in France. That's all I'll say on it for now. Okay, so next clip. We're on GT Sport. We're in a very chrome, that's not the greatest colour of a car, I would say. But yeah, I think that the main part of this, is it the first part of the clip or is it the second part of the clip? Let's focus on the first part of it, because the second hit here, it looks like it was, I mean, that's a clear penalty for that car, to be honest. So let's not focus on that one. This first clip, was this a penalty or was it not a penalty? I'll show it from the other perspective as well, and so you can see it from the other car, and then we'll put up the poll. You guys can vote. Poll will pop up in the top right. Would you give a penalty? Was the blue car at fault for this? Was the chrome car at fault? Would you give a penalty either way? Was it just a racing incident? Let me know your thoughts in the poll. So, for me, I would totally be expecting during this race that the blue car would give that position back to the chrome car. And if he didn't, then I would be giving a penalty. Obviously, let's not focus on that second one, because that's a clear just smash into the side of someone. But as we're coming along here, obviously the blue car's going for an overtake, but the chrome car, to his credit, massively outbrakes blue. So at this point, he's well ahead at this point, and now at this point he has the ability to, because he's completely ahead, he can then take the racing line into the corner. He has to be at least somewhat careful of the blue still being there. You have to leave a bit of margin, but for the most part, he can largely take his racing line. And what we see, if I slow it down, is the blue car basically just comes off the brakes. So at here it's okay, and then there, if you focus on the brakes of the blue car, we're alright. Then he's off the brakes and straight into the back of the chrome car. Now, if there was any intent for the blue car to avoid contact in that situation, why would he come off the brakes? If you don't want to hit the other car in this situation, if anything, you would be on the brakes more. Your foot would be going, down to the floor more than, you could even get it through the foot of the floor. So to come off the brakes at this point of the corner is a clear indication for me that he just wants to, roll into the back of the chrome car and take him out, essentially. So for me, absolutely penalty for the blue car. If he didn't give the place back for that, because that's not a fair legal overtake. He just knocked him out of the way, and he wouldn't have been able to get that overtake done if he didn't do that. So penalty for blue on me for that one. I'll see what you guys thought in the poll, but obviously, as with the case with all of these clips, not only can you tell me what you think in the polls in the top right before the clips, but let me know your thoughts down below in the comments as well. And also whether, your mind has been changed. Obviously, I can't do polls before and after clips because you can only have a maximum of 5 polls in one video. But if you did vote one way in the poll and then your mind was changed by the end, let me know in the comments. So, next clip, and I think I should probably try to give a little bit of background. As you can see, the red car over here is coming out of the pit lane. So this was said on the notes that this car was coming out of the pit lane, and obviously us in the blue car, we have the overspeed and we're aiming to make an overtake as he's coming out of the pit lane. So let's play this and then I'll let you guys decide on who you thought was at fault. I'll not give any thoughts myself at the moment, but the poll will pop up in the top right hand corner of the screen. Who was at fault for this one? Was it the red car? Was it the blue car? Or was it just a racing incident? Was nobody at fault? You guys let me know in the poll. So again, this one looks pretty straightforward to me. Obviously, the red car is a little bit worried about the fact that, in fact, I don't even need to slow it down. We can use the second clip. The red car is worried that that blue car's going to overtake him, and to me, just, you know, completely runs him out of room. There's no reason for the red car to be over in this part of the track when the next corner is a left-hander. He wants to be over here to turn left for the next corner. Plus, he's coming out of the pit lane, so he's slower. It's not as if the momentum of the car around this corner, which is, according to the notes also, but it's pretty clear to see, easily full throttle. It's not as if the momentum is taking him out here. He clearly just runs him out of road to keep the position, and you can see it very clearly here. Now we can slow it down. And you can't do that. As the red car, you can't just, you know, make a jink like that. You can see it quite clearly to run someone completely out of room. And even though he's made that jink, at this point, you know, he still keeps going over. He can, if he wants to make a little jink into the middle of the track, then okay, but you've got to leave some space, and he just doesn't do any of that. And for me, that's a clear penalty for the red car. He made a deliberate move, talking about the rules, he made a deliberate move to force another driver off the track. And you can't do that. You can't just keep a position from knocking someone off the track like that. It's not how it works. So, penalty for red car for me for that one. Pretty clear with that jink that he makes. There's no need for him to do that, and he clearly does it on purpose to stop himself from being overtaken because he's slower for coming out of the pit lane. And final clip, battling for the lead, Turismo versus Cheetah on GTA. And we're coming around here, and looks like we're gonna go into the chicane. And I'll let you guys vote on the poll with who you thought was at fault for this. If anyone, vote there. It'll be in the top right hand corner of the screen. Was this the Cheetah's fault? Was it the Turismo's fault? Or was it just a racing incident? Would you be giving a penalty for Cheetah, penalty for Turismo, or is this just a racing incident? So for those who are unaware of GTA, Cheetah's in front, Turismo's behind. Yeah, I imagine we don't have many people watching these videos that don't race in GTA as well. But you never know. So my thoughts, for me, nothing happens here. I would just say that this is a racing incident. They're obviously battling for the lead. The Turismo manages to get up in front, but the Cheetah hangs it around the outside and then gets an overspeed on the outside here. So at this point, and I'll just slow it down. At this point, it's pretty clear that the Turismo is behind. I mean, you can see his front end there. He's a full, you know, the front end of his car is on the back end of the Cheetah. So he should be backing out of this one. There's no way he's going to affect an overtake into a fast chicane like this. There's no way that's going to happen. So he's behind. He should just be backing out at this point. But he does try to keep his nose in. So to be fair to the Cheetah, he gives him a little bit of space. You know, really the Cheetah should be, well, he should be up here where the Turismo is. And given that the Turismo was completely behind, the Cheetah taking the tighter line through the chicane would be acceptable. But he doesn't, to be fair to the Cheetah. He decides to, you know, give a little bit of space to allow them not to have any incidents. And they don't really, nothing really happens. They don't have it coming together. They just, you know, there's a little bit of a crash on the outside. And it looks like, if you look on the mini map in the bottom left, so we're looking here, and specifically around this area, we're going to see the Turismo who's behind. I think he spins around there. But that's a consequence of him hitting the wall too much. Maybe it was different on his screen and there was a bit of lag involved, but you know, there was no contact. Nothing happened here. So him spinning around, the Turismo that is nothing to do with the cheetah. The cheetah actually gave space that he didn't really have to give. And if the Turismo hit the wall in the wrong way, or even if it was a little bit of lag from the cheetah that hit the front end of the Turismo into the wall and made it, you know, bounce off and spin around, I still wouldn't be giving any kind of penalty, because the Turismo really shouldn't have been there in the first place. He should have, you know, just kind of backed out of it into the corner. So for me, racing incident, that's how I would have voted in the poll. Nothing really going on here. It was just, you know, decent, close racing. And yeah, okay, the Turismo had an issue after that, but that wasn't the cheetah's fault. So yeah, let me know your thoughts as always with all of these clips down below in the comments. I'm sure you will, and maybe my thoughts on the first clip aren't going to be the most liked, but like I said, I think that there's a definite inconsistency with the way that the rules are being shown, and it's going to make me start to think a bit differently about how I apply the rules in this series. So that's pretty much it for this episode. You can find in the video description all the info and links that you may need to submit your own clips, and if you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon by becoming a YouTube member or simply subscribing and liking the video. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.